that cool? Really nice. Get some out here and eat your lunch. This is my new hood now. And you come in to the kitchen, and the kitchen is good sized kitchen. You got a bench here.
If Charles did walk out of this apartment, where did he go?
The closest person to us is missing.
I'm thinking that someone just has him and he's somewhere. Like, where is he?
The first time that he ever went to Anna's apartment was the last time he was seen alive.
I remember asking her, like, why are you not freaking out?
There were some red flags that started to pop up.
They were extremely concerned. They thought maybe something terrible happened.
Charles Butler's final moments, that's not a good way to go.
56-year-old Florida businessman Charles Butler has just moved back to his hometown, New York City.
This is really nice. I love this city.
He would always talk about how New York City is the greatest place on earth. I'm Molly Butler. I'm Chuck Butler's oldest daughter. Originally, my dad was from Queens. He lived there till early 20s. He said that he went to Florida to visit a friend and ended up meeting my mom. They fell in love pretty quickly, and they ended up getting married after a few years and having the three of us.
After Molly, Charles and his wife Kim welcome Margie and Maxwell. As the family grows, Charles's career takes off.
My dad was definitely a businessman. He owned a pizza shop, and he was actually the first pizza place in Central Florida to start delivery pizza. Then he started doing insurance. He opened up his own insurance company.
He just, great businessman. Great with finances. Very, very smart. I'm Margie Bolton, and I'm Chuck Butler's middle daughter.
We're in love with architecture in New York City.
His heart was always back in New York. He was always a city boy through and through, for sure.
While Charles's business is growing, in 1997, his personal life is upended when he and his wife Kim decide to divorce.
And then they just separated. Like, they literally got together to have us 3 kids. Like, they just weren't really meant to be together.
We would visit my dad on Wednesday nights and every other weekend. He would always try to just make the time that we had the best that it could be. He always made everything fun. One of my favorite memories of all time was a New York vacation. We were on the subway, and my dad starts singing, "Always Look on the Bright Side of Life." And he gets out onto the street.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to feel sorry for me, even though I'm down and out.
We were younger at the time. I remember my brother was really embarrassed. Like, "Dad, stop."
My heart's bleeding.
I'm Maxwell Butler. I am Charles Butler's son and the youngest of 3.
Oh my God.
It would be so embarrassing for us, but looking back on it, it was just a good time.
In 2012, Charles encourages his oldest daughter, Molly, to follow her career ambitions.
My dad was all about living your dreams. Find out what you're passionate about and make that your business. So I knew that I wanted to be a New York City hairstylist. That was my dream since I was very, very young.
Charles gives Molly a push by suggesting they become roommates.
When I was 24, my dad and I found an apartment in New York City.
Okay. I'm on 78.
And the deal was, my dad would come up for 1 weekend out of every month. Well, he was there 3 weeks out of every month.
Charles's part-time residence in New York coincides with another significant turning point.
After he got divorced from my mom, he was never really open to the idea of marriage. But he said, I wanted to find my queen. So he started getting on a bunch of dating websites. He would always make dating websites in New York, even though he lived in Florida.
In the spring, he connects with a woman from Brooklyn named Anna.
My first impression of her was she's super cute. I could totally see why my dad was into her. He was just smitten by her.
I had never seen my dad like that before. He was in puppy love.
On September 15th, Charles comes to town for one of his regular visits with his daughter and new girlfriend.
On his way up, he gets into his first class seat and he's taking selfies like, I worked hard and now I'm gonna go play hard, and I happen to get the seat next to me is empty, so I get the whole row to myself. He was just so excited about it. He said, this is the way the whole trip is gonna be, just blessings everywhere.
Charles makes plans to spend Monday night with just Molly.
We just had the best conversation about, wow, we're living in New York City and I'm a New York City hairstylist. And I was in a very, loving, healthy relationship, and he was in a loving, healthy relationship. We were just reflecting on all of it. I didn't know at the time it was going to be my last conversation with him, but looking back on it, it was literally the most perfect conversation we could have had. It was just awesome.
The next day, Tuesday, Charles has plans with Anna for a special evening.
Tuesday, he had messaged me and he said, hey, I'm actually going to go out to Anna's house tonight. We're going to watch a movie. I'm going to sleep out there. She lived in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. So this was a big deal that he was going to her house for the very first time.
That night, Charles fills Molly in on the date.
So he was messaging me, oh, it's so sweet. I got a home-cooked meal for the first time in forever. We're having a good time. He's like, I got my cantaloupe for the morning. It's great. She's going to go to work, and then I'll come back home and I'll meet you in the city for lunch tomorrow. I was trying to book one of my flights back to Florida, and for some reason, when I was booking my flight, my credit card wasn't being accepted. So I was asking him, hey, can you buy my flight to Florida? I'll transfer you the money. He said, yeah, absolutely. Remind me in the morning.
The next day, when Molly doesn't hear from him, she texts her dad about the tickets.
And he told me, I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling good. I had a party. And he called me Honey, which my dad had many nicknames for me, and Honey was never one of them. So it didn't really make sense. So it's just like, okay, please book it. When I left work that day, I went home and my dad wasn't home. And I was trying to call him over and over and over, and his phone was dead. I didn't have her number at this point. I didn't know how to get a hold of her, but I also knew that she was the last person that he was with.
The next day, Molly's concern intensifies.
I started getting calls from his employees at the insurance company down in Florida. And they were asking me, we haven't been able to get a hold of your dad. What's going on?
By Friday night, 3 days since she's heard from her dad, Molly is desperate to make contact with Anna.
I find a way to break into my dad's iPad and find Anna's email. So 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, I get an email back from her finally. And she said, hey, Molly, he left my house on Wednesday morning and broke up with me. And I haven't heard from him since. My dad was head over heels in love with her. He had told me that he was already looking at rings. So at this point, I know something's up. I email her back and I said, my dad is officially missing.
We still hadn't heard from him, and we were extremely concerned.
It was just as if he just vanished.
investigators zero in on Charles's final moments.
That was the last footage that we had of Charles. He just vanished the next day.
And the focus falls on a seemingly friendly face.
Have you had the locks changed since this?
Since that, no.
But we didn't know what the role was that she played. That's when I really, really got suspicious.
How does a man who is completely content with his life just go missing? The only thing Charles Butler's family knows is that he went on a date with his new girlfriend Anna, and then abruptly ended their relationship.
I'm talking to her and I say, like, what happened? What was going on? She says, we had dinner on Tuesday night. Everything was great. He spent the night. On Wednesday, I went to work.
According to Anna, that morning, Charles stayed in bed in her apartment.
She said in the morning we were texting each other, and then by the afternoon I was getting texts from him. And then he just broke up with me for no reason. And I said, oh, can I see the text messages? And she goes, no, I deleted all of them already. And I was like, wait, what? Why did you delete the text? And she said, well, because he broke up with me and I was heartbroken and I didn't want anything to remember him by, so I deleted all the texts. I remember asking her, like, why are you not freaking out? It's like, it just felt like she was so disconnected from it and it just felt weird. I could feel something was off and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I said, I'm gonna call the cops, we need to find my dad. 2 cops showed up. They basically just start taking the information. And I'm telling them every detail that I can give him. His phone was dead for like 3 days. I show them the text messages. He was spelling things weird. Certain people will say like lowercase OK, and that's how my dad would say it. But this was capital O, period, capital K, period. So just the way that he was texting was weird. It was very obvious that it wasn't him.
I am Christopher Heath. I'm the investigative reporter at WFTV Channel 9 in Orlando, Florida. We covered the disappearance of Charles Butler. NYPD comes in, they look at it. There's no evidence of foul play. There's no tracks saying something suspicious is happening, apart from the fact that nobody's heard from him and the cell phone text messages are a little off-putting. New York City is a giant place, and NYPD have a lot on their plate. They say, we're not throwing up roadblocks and shutting down, the boroughs till we find him, because we just don't have enough here pointing us in that direction.
They kind of were just like, a bunch of people in the city do this all the time. He's probably just hanging out at the beach, trying to just like get away from his life. And I was trying to tell them, like, no, something is happening. Like, this is not okay. This is out of character. One of them, I guess I had pulled on his heartstrings just enough. And he said, listen, I'm going to put out a report. They're not going to actively look for your dad, but I'm going to do what I can and figure something out for you. There's not much that we can do, but I'm going to do what I can do to help you.
Despite the detective's assurances, Molly's concern is rising.
And I started freaking out at this point. The closest person to us is missing, like literally just vanished out of her life with no answers.
Like, he doesn't go off the radar. Like, with his kids, he doesn't ignore us. He doesn't take a day or two, no matter how much he parties. When it comes to his kids, like, he's always just there. Something just didn't feel right.
After a few days had passed, my sisters told me that, like, they still hadn't heard from him and that they were extremely concerned and that they thought maybe something terrible happened.
Feeling like they have hit a dead end, the Butler children resolve to take matters into their own hands.
We decided that we were going to have to go the route of a private investigator at this point.
I'm Keith Freeman. I'm a private investigator. I had just come back to Florida from a trip to Central America. I was on my way home when I got the call. I literally turned my car around and booked a flight and went straight up to New York that night.
5 days have passed since anyone has heard from Charles. Freeman begins downloading with Molly.
And I'm telling him all the details. He's like, wow, you did a lot of the legwork for me. Thank you. One of the first things that he had said to me, like, no more contact with Anna whatsoever.
Freeman then digs into the police theory that Charles may have willfully disappeared.
The first step is we check to determine whether Charles had booked a flight through his office, to check his billing records on his credit card, and found nothing to corroborate the fact that he had made any additional travel plans.
There was no activity anywhere whatsoever. We had all kept trying to call his phone. It was off. We couldn't get through.
With no evidence to support that Charles left on his own accord, Freeman sets out to find him.
The first step is to get as close to where Charles was in his last known location. I was planning to go straight to his girlfriend Anna's house, which is where he was last seen and where the children last believed he was.
When our dad went missing, the last that we had heard was that he was with Anna, so suspicions definitely arose. The first time that he ever went back to her apartment was the last time he was seen alive.
The private investigator hired by the Butler family is on his way to interview the last person to see Charles alive, his girlfriend, Anna.
We went straight to Anna's apartment. We noticed a couple cameras that were located in the apartment building and on the exterior of the apartment building, but we didn't know who owned those cameras and whether they were operational. Anna appeared to be worried about what had happened to Charles, so she was more than happy to talk to us. She described the night that she spent with Charles as perfect. According to Anna, they were in love. So she was extremely concerned about what had happened to him and where he might have gone. No reason to think at that time that there was anything untoward.
But while interacting with Anna, something catches Freeman's eye.
When I entered the apartment, one of the first things I noticed in the hallway on a shelf was a man's watch. It didn't appear to be Charles Butler's watch.
Keith is struck by how flashy the watch is, which doesn't seem to fit Charles's laid-back style.
Keith kept me updated through the whole process, and he had asked her, and she said that it was her ex's watch.
Anna's ex is a 46-year-old Russian immigrant named Mikhail Chernayev.
I asked Anna about her ex-husband. They shared a child together, but they had been divorced for a long time, and Mikhail had been remarried, had another baby. Mikhail had 3 vehicles that he parked in the courtyard behind Anna's residence. So they still maintained enough of a relationship for him to be able to access the parking spaces and use them for his work and his personal cars.
After visiting Anna, Freeman reaches out to the NYPD detectives that offered Molly help. They inform him that they, too, have visited Anna's building. They've discovered that the security cameras there were installed by a resident, and they are working to identify the owner and secure the footage.
Keith kept kind of running into these things where he didn't have access to stuff, only the cops did. And since he wasn't a cop, he wasn't able to do some of the stuff. So we kind of had this like stop and go.
Then Molly gets a call from a friend of her father's in Florida.
She told me that a month before he went missing, Anna's ex-husband called my dad from Anna's phone and basically said, she's my woman, stay away from her. It was just the one threatening call and nobody really knew about it.
based upon the fact that Charles had received what he believed was a threatening phone call from Anna's ex-husband. I was definitely suspicious that Mikhail was involved in Chuck's disappearance.
It's now 2 weeks since the Butlers have heard from their father, and the weight of the investigation is taking a toll.
I've heard people describe anxiety attacks, but I had never suffered from one up until this point. And it would just take me out. Like I would get like tunnel vision, I would hyperventilate, I'd be on my knees like crying. It was just literally like survival mode. The way I coped was with alcohol, and I completely numbed out. And had I not met my now husband after my dad went missing, like I truly believe I would be dead today.
Then, on October 4th, 16 days after Charles went missing, the NYPD gains access to the footage from Anna's building and share the material with Freeman. Does this footage contain clues about Charles Butler's final moments?
There was video footage of Charles and Anna entering the front entrance of the apartment complex at about 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. They went shopping, came back, couple just entering the building normally.
At about 7:30 a.m. the following morning, they spot something else.
We have video evidence of Anna on her cell phone outside the residence, and she finally had to go into work.
Freeman continues watching the footage from the rest of the day.
There is no video of Chuck ever leaving the apartment building after Charles and Anna had last entered her apartment. That was the last footage that we had of Charles.
We know he walked into her apartment. We know he is not seen walking out. What happened?
He just vanished the next day.
The footage does, however, reveal a potential clue.
One of the video cameras clearly showed Mikhail's car being parked in the early morning hours.
Hours later, after Anna leaves, the van pulls out.
He was watching the apartment and waiting for her to leave.
Moments later, a camera in the back of Anna's building reveals something else.
The video also captured Mikhail himself coming and going in the courtyard behind Anna's residence. We were able to see his work van leaving and returning on 2 occasions that morning.
While footage from behind the building is obscured, Mikhail's movements in the courtyard, combined with the fact that Charles never walked out the front door, lead investigators to a startling conclusion.
NYPD believed that Charles had met with foul play and that Mikhail assaulted Charles. And the last time that he left in that van, Charles' body was in the van. The NYPD was seeking search warrants on the vehicles specifically that were in the courtyard.
But days later, disaster strikes.
Once in a 100-year event swooped in. Superstorm Sandy struck.
The storm submerges 250,000 vehicles, including Chernayev's.
Sandy washed away a significant portion of any evidence that would have been necessary to connect Mikhail to Charles Butler's disappearance. It was devastating to the investigation.
When potential evidence linking Mikhail Chernayev to the murder of Charles Butler is destroyed in Superstorm Sandy, it's a crushing blow to the investigation.
Superstorm Sandy was devastating to New York and the people in New York. Makes it really challenging for the NYPD to be able to follow up on anything. They were at a standstill on the case for several months.
5 months into the investigation, Freeman knows the likelihood that Charles is alive is slim.
The words that Keith had used, it's like, your dad's not coming back. Like, he's officially, like, gone. I still can't tell you any answers, but we do know that he's gone.
In my teenage years, my dad and I would just kind of butt heads, I think. Like, we didn't always have the best relationship. I remember the last trip he made me get out of the car and give him a hug, which was very unusual because we didn't do that a lot. But we hugged and told each other we loved each other, and that was the last time I saw him.
Mikhail Chernayev is still the NYPD's lead suspect, but there's no evidence to charge him with murder.
NYPD cared about this case, but he was a missing person. They didn't have any evidence to really lead them to anything else.
There's not the physical evidence. There's not a pool of blood somewhere. There's no body.
In the face of a stalled investigation, Keith Freeman pitches an idea to the Butler children.
We decided to talk to the media in hopes of gaining additional information about what had happened to Charles.
The private investigator had gone, I think, as far as he could and asked if we'd be willing to take a look at this case.
If Charles did walk out of this apartment, where did he go? He didn't have a car in New York City. He would have either had to take a taxi or public transportation.
Where the trail for us goes cold is once he arrives at Anna's apartment. We needed to go see some of these places. We needed to try and get an interview with Anna since she was the last one to see him alive. She decides, yeah, she'd like to talk to us. Let's see if she'll shine some light on these last couple of hours.
We loved each other, and we wanted to spend our life together.
Charles and Anna went to her apartment. The next morning, Anna says she gave Charles a key to the apartment and left for work. That would be the last time she or anyone else who knew Charles Butler would see him alive.
I gave him the key. He closed upper lock. So it means that he left.
Have you had the locks changed since this?
Since that, no.
Why not get your locks changed? But she hadn't. It hadn't even crossed her mind. Later on in the interview, I asked about when she got back, had he made the bed? And she couldn't remember. And just some of her reactions were, to me, there were some red flags that started to pop up. We knew Mikhail was a character within this larger story. When I asked about Mikhail, she seemed to dismiss the idea that Mikhail was somehow involved. She said, he's not behind this.
As Christopher Heath is reporting his story, another news organization reveals surprising information about Anna and Mikhail.
We found out that she basically started dating her ex again. That's when I really got suspicious. We didn't think that maybe she was involved in what happened, but she might have been involved in protecting Mikhail from getting caught.
Christopher Heath's report airs in late February of 2013.
The next day, we had a different response from the NYPD. We had the involvement of the state police. We had the involvement of senior detectives in Brooklyn and Manhattan.
With intrigue swirling around Anna, the NYPD turns to a specialist.
I'm Konstantin Papadopoulos, a detective with the New York City Police Department, assigned to investigate the Charles Butler missing persons case. We really wanted to know, was Anna involved in any way of Mr. Butler's disappearance, or if she had prior knowledge of it or any of that. We wanted Anna polygraphed.
Eight months after Charles Butler disappeared, an NYPD detective is interrogating his girlfriend Anna.
I needed to find out if she had any prior knowledge of Mr. Butler's disappearance or if she had any involvement in his disappearance. So when I spoke to Anna, her demeanor was very cooperative. Anna told me she wanted to find out what happened to him as well. I asked about her ex-husband, Mikhail. She met Mikhail in Russia. They also have a son in common, but they did have their differences. According to Anna, he was a very jealous person, questioned her a lot about different things, even though they were not together. He was still jealous. During my course of the interview with Anna, she didn't believe Mikhail had something to do with his disappearance, but you don't know what's going on in someone's head, you know? At the end of the polygraph, she came up, no deception indicated. She had no involvement in Charles Butler's disappearance, so she was in the dark.
With no additional insight or evidence, the investigation is at a standstill. But the following day, the NYPD gets an unexpected call from officials in upstate New York.
There was a fisherman whose boat had broken down in an infrequently traveled area. The fisherman got out of his boat near the shoreline and stumbled upon a body.
When the body was found upstate New York, that DNA was matched with the DNA that the case detective submitted. Then they could ultimately say, yes, this is Charles Butler that was found by the lost fisherman.
After 8 months, Charles Butler has been found.
Like, I remember getting the phone call. I was still in New York. It was more like brutal and gory than we could have ever imagined. I had to not only take the information in for myself, but then immediately turn around and tell my brother and sister. I don't know. Looking back, it kind of feels like that was almost like, I don't know if the right word is relief. I remember it was a really heavy night of drinking for me, that's all I know. That really sucks.
For investigators, the discovery of the body is the first piece of solid evidence in the case.
Charles is found under suspicious circumstances. So now the investigation is going to change. So at this point, the detective calls me up and asks if I could polygraph Mikhail. He voluntarily came, yes. He was very cooperative. He seemed enthusiastic to help. He's a middle-aged man, medium to large build, brown hair, balding a little bit.
Without revealing that Charles's body has been found, Papadopoulos begins his routine.
Whenever you interview, interrogate somebody that's suspected of a crime, it's a long process. First off, with Mikhail, I built some rapport with him. We sat down, we spoke about common things, you know, what he did for a living, where is he from in Russia, when did he come to the United States, you know, questions like that. Just try to build rapport and see where his mindset's at for the polygraph later on. I asked Mikhail the regular questions that any investigator would ask him. Do you know him? Have you ever met him? Mikhail denied that he knew Charles. He explained to me that he knew that Anna was dating somebody, but he didn't know who it was.
Then Papadopoulos suddenly produces a document, a map of the exact area where Charles's body was found.
The demeanor that he had quickly changed. She was very nervous. At this point, everything came crashing around Michal.
When confronted with a map of the location where Charles Butler's body was discovered, lead suspect Mikhail Chernayev begins changing his story.
I'm sure Michal thought in his mind that, okay, as long as they don't find Mr. Butler, I'm gonna be okay. But Mr. Butler was found, and then everything came crashing around Michal.
Before the polygraph begins, Mikhail begins speaking freely about Charles and Anna.
Upon questioning by the NYPD, he confessed that he was in love with Anna, and he was jealous over anybody having a relationship with her, that in his mind, he went to the apartment to confront Charles about the relationship.
Michal said he walked over to Anna's place. After he observed her leaving for work, approximately 7:30 a.m., he knew that Charles would be home, knocked on the door, a confrontation ensued.
According to Mikhail, he pushed his way into the apartment. Charles screamed at him. Mikhail asked him to be quiet. When he didn't, Mikhail punched him in the face and knocked him down. He said that Charles still would not stop screaming. Mikhail took a knife from the kitchen counter, stabbed Charles, and suffocated him. Mikhail's explanation was that he was possessed by a demon.
We never got to the polygraph examination because during the pretest interview, Michal confessed to Mr. Butler's demise. Michal told me that he didn't want Anna to find out that he had any involvement in this. So he took Charles Butler's body to a location upstate where he used to go on vacation, a secluded area. And that's where he dumped Charles Butler's body. Charles Butler's final moments, that's not a good way to go.
Papadopoulos then questions Mikhail about the bizarre messages that were sent to Anna and the Butler children after Charles was dead.
Charles Butler's cell phone had a lock feature on it. So I asked Michal, I go, how did you use Mr. Butler's cell phone? Because you were texting people. Michal clearly said it was easy. I just took the SIM card out and put it in my phone, and I was able to use the phone. So I asked him, well, why did you do this to Michal? And he said to trick everybody.
Mikhail is arrested for the murder of Charles Butler. The following day, investigators go in search of additional evidence to bolster their case.
The NYPD fluoroceled looking for blood samples, and were able to find a very small drop of blood in the kitchen that matched Charles Butler.
Chernayev is indicted on charges of second-degree murder. Months later, he recants his confession, and the case moves to trial. And again, the woman at the center of the deadly love triangle becomes an object of curiosity.
She got asked to testify for both sides. You could tell, she was in a really weird position. I watched her face when they showed his confession video, and it was the first time she ever heard it. It dawned on her. It took 1.5 years for her to even connect it in her own mind that he was the one that killed my dad. He did it. And what he was telling her at the time was that he was in jail in place of her. He told her that they were trying to arrest her for killing my dad, and he's taking the blame for her. I feel like she was innocent in it. I feel like she was innocent almost to a fault, but that she was tricked by him too.
On September 29th, 2016, almost 4 years from when Charles was killed, there is a verdict.
A jury comes back and finds him guilty of murder. The judge handed down a sentence of 25 years to life.
With the trials behind us, I felt like we were finally able to create our own closure, if you will. The grieving process is something I still struggle with. I'm grateful for the time that we did have together because he raised me to be the man I am today.
Monday night we had that really awesome conversation. I think that trip he was the most excited I had ever seen. And I think part of it was because, of course, he's coming back to the city that he loves.
Saturday afternoon in the city, street festival. How do you like this neighborhood, huh?
And he was going to see the woman that he fell in love with and get ready for a really epic weekend in New York. The last time that he had texted me, I was supposed to go get air in my tires. He had texted me like, make sure you get air in your tires. My dad was my best friend, and any question that I ever asked was never off the table. What you couldn't see in yourself, like my dad could see it in you. He was our best friend. Like he was my closest friend. The bond was there.
Reno, Nevada, May 13th, 2020. A 911 call alerts police to a shooting at a city center motel.
911, what's the address of the emergency? I don't know, everybody shot and we all came out. And then the room next to me, I kept hearing kids screaming. Suddenly we banged on the door, they opened the door, there's a lady shot in. Did you say someone was shot? Yes, she's shot in the head, she's dead.
It was a very busy night, I remember that. It's May, it started warming up, people are out a lot more. So pretty much right from the get-go, we were busy. As more reporting parties were calling in, there was at one point where a female told dispatch that there were shots fired, there was multiple shots heard, then that there was a female that was down.
Within minutes, officers are on the scene.
We respond immediately and we stay code 3, so that's where our lights and sirens, we're trying to get there as quick as we can.
I was the on-call homicide prosecutor, so I got the call from the Reno Police Department Robbery Homicide Unit and then responded out to the La Quinta. We called up a judge early morning hours, applied for a search warrant to get into the 2 rooms, and then those rooms were processed by a detective and a forensic investigator.
By the time I got there, there was a lot of people. Well, a lot of people were trying to see what happens. You hear lights and sirens, and naturally human beings want to see what's going on.
Officers soon established that the shooting noises have come from room 127.
So 127 was dark, there wasn't a lot of lights in there. So we had to turn on our flashlights to clear the room. That's the first room that I saw. And then the conjoining door to 126 was open, so I was able to see into 126.
The first responding patrol officers, they saw the victim in the bed.
And it was very apparent that the injuries she had sustained, that she had passed.
It was immediately clear that the victim had been shot multiple times.
She had multiple bullet wounds. I specifically remember she had bullet wounds to her legs that were bleeding very bad. I'd seen dead bodies before from going to other calls, but it was my first homicide that I had seen. And the extent of her injuries definitely was like harrowing for me, of like, oh wow, like whoever did this to her, they meant to do it, and it was very severe because she was very, very brutalized.
But there's more. Officers make a shocking discovery.
What turned out to be her 2 young sons, who were 7 and 5 at the time, they had exited the room afterwards and went to, there was a very nice lady, totally unrelated, who was in the room next door, and she took the 2 boys in and called 911 and was with them until police arrived, comforting them.
Sometime just around midnight, I got a call from my sergeant. He let me know that he was assigning me as the lead investigator for a homicide. Information was a little bit sparse at that moment, but he let me know that it appeared to be one female victim and that there were potentially 2 young boys that witnessed the incident. So Lakita over here on our left, we were trying to cordon off the area and not let anyone in or out of the parking lot at that time. So if you'll see there at the very end on your left, that is room 127. And directly on the other side of that is room 126. So when you walk into room 127, if you were to walk straight ahead, you'll run into the adjoining door that leads right into room 126. I mean, there's a lot of officers here, right? It was a pretty big event and there was a lot of people involved. I could see a lot of the room lights were on and I could see a lot of people looking out the windows. It's hard to sleep, I can imagine, after seeing something like that or hearing something like that. But there was a lot of occupants that we had to go to every single room here to talk. I met with the responding officers and the responding sergeant to see what details they had at the time. They gave me some preliminary details about their response and what they witnessed when they walked inside the room. They also advised me that 2 young children had run to a room next door and that the 911 caller was basically helping the children after the homicide occurred.
What happened to her was extremely tragic. It's more so internalizing what those poor little boys saw and what they went through. I know one of the officers brought the little boys into the ambulance to swab their blood. We have to get all the evidence that we can. And the older brother was telling his little brother how much he loves him. So that right there, these poor little boys just saw the one person who's the most important to them, the one person that's supposed to protect them. They just saw her be completely brutalized.
The 2 boys provide police with some distressing information about what they saw in the motel room.
They saw mommy getting shot, mommy getting hurt. It was by a bad guy. The bad guy did it. The bad guy shot mommy. And they were covered in blood. So it was apparent, too, that they had crawled in bed with her afterwards, after she had been shot. One of the little boys had a burn mark on his back from the casings falling onto his back. Another comment that she mentioned was that one of the little boys said he played dead in the bed so that way bad guy wouldn't shoot him, too.
You hate to say they're lucky from what they went through, right? But they're lucky that they were not seriously hurt beyond that burn mark.
I mean, without getting too personal, these were 2 very young boys, and I had a young boy of my own that was similar age, and I couldn't imagine that there was no family around. They had just witnessed this horrific incident, and they had no one that they knew around them. So I started to speak with the motel manager about the room registration, and he informed me that room 126 was registered to a Lynette Lozano, but it wasn't immediately apparent who her family were at the time. But we were working diligently. I wanted those kids to be with someone in their family as quick as they could be.
Investigators learned the victim was Lynette Lozano.
I really looked up to her, I just remember anything Lynette did, I wanted to try it or I wanted to do. She always was protective, always looked out for us. She was a big baker. She loved doing tea parties for us. She was strong. She was somebody who you would want on your team or on your side. And I just remember laughing with her. She had one of the best laughs you'd ever heard. It was like gut. Like it was one of those where you couldn't help but laugh with her.
She loved to sing for everybody, and she was always outgoing, and she got even put in PCA, which is Projects for Children with Exceptional Abilities, before her kindergarten year, and she loved reading. When we had our second child, I go, "Why are you not reading? You need to read." And he said, "Because Lynette gets in trouble every time she reads." And I said, "That's because she's supposed to do chores."
It was clear that Lynette was a natural leader, someone people could rely on.
When she stepped into the room, she just had that charisma and that energy where you wanted to be around her. A very caring person. She was a fantastic big sister, and she involved me with everything she had going on, and she did her hair one way, she did my hair the same. Like, she very much doted on me when I was younger. So I remember her when I'm braiding my daughter's hair because she always did that for me. So I look at her pictures, I look at what I grew up with, and I see that, and I just keep that. And that's what I remember her by.
But how had someone like Lynette ended up in this condition? Police began their homicide investigation and quickly uncovered leads as to who her killer might be.
I examined Miss Lozano. Her injuries were more than what would typically be needed to end someone's life, and sometimes that gives us some insight as to who the perpetrator may be. It's not definitive or anything, but typically in an overkill situation, it's a suspect that's known to the victim.
Reno police are investigating a deadly shooting at a motel last night. Ed Pierce has the story.
The call of shots fired came into dispatch shortly after 10:30 last night. Late this morning, forensic investigators were still working the scene. Police have released virtually no further information, but the violence of last night's encounter was evident.
My preliminary steps, I walked around the scene, identified the location of the rooms. I examined the exterior of the doors and saw that there was no apparent forced entry into the room. It didn't appear that there was forced entry through the windows.
They found 23 fired cartridge cases, which were discharged during the shooting. That was on the floor in between the two beds, so it's your standard hotel room with 2 queen-size beds. Lynette was in one bed. The 2 boys were in the other bed. There were several on the floor in between the beds. There were roughly 10 on the bed where the 2 boys were laying, and then there was others scattered kind of in the walkway coming into the 2 adjoining rooms, as well as underneath that second bed.
It was clearly a sustained and determined attack, with a weapon designed to cause maximum harm.
When we examined some of those rounds, I found that they were 7.62 millimeter, which is typically associated with AK firearms or their offshoots.
What I thought was very interesting was there was a lot in that doorway in between where the rooms conjunct, and then they stopped. And then there were some by the bed where the boys were sleeping, and then there were some right in front of her, which in my mind means they took a pause and still continued to shoot, which for me is, again, just reiterated that this was vengeful, this was personal.
Police were able to make some assumptions about Lynette's final moments from what they found beside her. It was clear she had been taken by surprise by her killer.
When we began to examine the bed that Miss Lozano was located on, we found a book. And interestingly, the book front cover had a defect that appeared to be a bullet hole through the cover, and it exited about halfway through the book. It didn't go through the back of the book. We also found a flashlight next to her, which led me to believe that she was likely reading a book with the flashlight so that her kids could go to sleep when it happened. It didn't appear that she was caught off guard or that she was trying to run or get away. It just appeared that she was laying there.
The welfare of the 2 boys was the immediate priority of the officers on the scene.
We got called out on scene immediately because I think what happened was the sergeant was having a hard time. He was thinking about his own children. The officers were having a hard time. They were thinking about their own children, and they were wanting victim services to help with the emotional support more than anything else. When we have homicides where children are left unattended with their deceased parent or deceased family member, it's a much more traumatizing experience for them because they fully understand that mom wasn't able to communicate with them anymore. And they were young children where they couldn't care for themselves either. And so having that offender leave them like that, I think that does make a greater impact on everybody.
It was difficult. And I think that we were doing the best that we could in trying to get the information that we needed and to protect the children from having to relive it. My hope was that we would only have to speak with them one time ever about what happened, because I didn't want them to relive that too many times.
Detective Smith briefly spoke with Lynette's eldest son.
He didn't give a lot of details. He basically said that he was staying in a hotel room with his mother, that he and his brother were sleeping on one bed in the room, and that his mother was sleeping on another bed in the room. And the adjoining room was a man that he knew as Lamar. He described trying to fall asleep in bed, uncertain if he was asleep at the time, but he awoke to what can only be presumed as very loud shooting, a fire alarm going off, and he said his back was burning. And it was traumatic. It was very difficult to talk to him about some of those things. I mean, he woke up to all this and walked over and turned on the light and basically saw that his mom was deceased.
It was Nick called and he said, hey, do you have a daughter, Lynette Lozano? I said, yeah. And he said, well, she was murdered last night. So I said, okay. I said, where were her two boys? Because he said, well, they were in the room with her. But he said they were fine. I said, well, no, they weren't. If they saw it, they're not fine, but.
My mom told me that my sister's dead, and I remember getting like this hazy feeling and just falling. And I just rolled into a ball under my desk and I'm just shaking. It was such a surreal moment just hearing that.
I don't know why I never answer my phone during work, but my mom called twice and I was like, oh, my mom's calling, just give me a second. And right when I answered, she said, your sister's dead. She was murdered in a hotel room and shot 23 times. And then I said, where are the babies? And she said, I don't know anything, I'm heading home. And I told her, when I see those little boys without Lynette there, this is 1000% real. No one gets to wake up and say, oh, that was just a bad dream.
It's the morning of May 14th, 2020. Detectives in Nevada have launched a homicide investigation after 42-year-old single mother, Lynette Lozano, is found shot over 20 times while asleep beside her two young boys.
The biggest little city. Not sure that we're a little city anymore, though. I think that's an older saying for our town. You know, the town was formerly, and still is in a lot of ways, a tourist town. There's a lot of people that come in and out of the town. We have a criminal element here, but I consider it to be relatively safe.
In 2020, the management at La Quinta is very different from the management that exists now. The management at La Quinta before didn't necessarily, I don't want to say permitted criminal behavior, but they maybe did not always do anything to deter criminal behavior. So there was a lot more criminal behavior occurring there. There was a lot more calls for service for law enforcement to La Quinta. And then after this homicide occurred, management changed and really focused on safety. So they had to really work hard to remarket and strategize for the community to feel safe going there.
Room 127 was registered to Lamar Adams. When I dug a little bit deeper through the registration records, it was interesting in that about 2 weeks prior to the homicide, Lynette Lozano and Lamar Adams checked in to the same room. They were initially staying both in 126. At some point during the course of those weeks, Lamar Adams left for about 3 days. He returned to a different room. I wasn't certain of exactly why that occurred, but it suggested that there was potentially some sort of conflict that had occurred between the two. I was able to find Miss Lozano's car outside of her room, but I was unable to find Mr. Adams' vehicle outside his room. Whether that made him a suspect or another potential victim at the time, I wasn't certain. But he was definitely a person of interest at the time.
Detectives from Reno PD try to learn more about Lynette's background from her family in the hopes that they can help explain how she ended up here.
The impression that they gave me is that they had a very large, loving family, and at some point, Lynette had become a little bit estranged.
Lynette was born and raised in Alturas, a small town in Northern California.
Lynette gave birth to her first child 7 days after she turned 18. She stayed a few years in Alturas. She was working, she was doing really well. And then when she moved to San Diego, she moved in with her first husband, and they started their family.
This young couple had 2 kids together, but Lynette struggled when her husband, a Marine, was deployed overseas.
After he went over to Japan, Lynette was staying at base. Her friends were calling me saying she's on meth and she's acting kind of crazy and stuff.
We went to go find Lynette, and that's when happened upon what you would describe as a crack house. When we found my sister, it wasn't her. You could tell she was using drugs. My niece and nephew were in the back of this vehicle, filthy. My nephew at the time had a really soggy diaper on him, was drinking like old rotten milk. My sister had marks and bruises on her. Looking back, I was like, oh man, those are track marks. You know, she's shooting up, she's using.
I took both of the kids and had them, and then their dad came home about 7-8 months later, and he came up and I told him, I said, hey, get your house, get everything, and you can take the kids. And at that time, she did get arrested. She got arrested for embezzling because apparently she was really good on computers. The charges were, for stealing money off of businesses and stuff.
After losing custody of her 2 eldest children because of her drug abuse, Lynette spent time in and out of prison. Then, her family got a shocking phone call from the prison hospital.
My parents get a call in May saying your grandson's ready to be picked up, and we're totally blindsided. Had to go prepare and get everything for this brand new baby that they didn't know was coming, and that wasn't a mistake or like something that was forgotten. That was an intentional hiding something, even though you're gonna totally tear up everybody's lives here in a few months.
After the birth of her 3rd child, Matthew, Lynette gets her life somewhat back on track, if only for a short while.
She was home, she was living around the corner, she had a good job, everything was going very well, and then all of a sudden it was, oh, Lynette's moving to Susanville. She moved to Susanville to be with a man who was a registered sex offender, and Matthew couldn't live with her, so she had him living with 2 other people in town while her and her boyfriend lived out of town.
So she had left him with these 2 teenagers who she would buy food for, but I'm sure the teenagers and all their friends would eat all the food, and Matthew was sleeping in a closet.
He was being abused and tortured by these 2 teenagers who had no business watching a child to begin with.
And that's where I was like, man, she's not Lynette anymore.
The family reached their breaking point when Lynette has her 2 youngest boys with this man.
I wish I would have shown her some grace, some kindness, but I didn't. I just told her I'm so upset with her. I don't want her to contact me if she's going to continue to choose her addictions and the men over her kids, because I can't do it anymore. I can't keep picking up the pieces. And she didn't respond to me, and I was like, okay, so I guess this is it. And I was estranged with her over 10 years until we found out.
The last contact the family had with Lynette was less than 2 months before her death.
I started to research Miss Lozano on social media. She had posted about a month earlier a GoFundMe, and the GoFundMe was set up by her, and it requested assistance as she was trying to escape a domestic situation. It didn't go into great detail, and it didn't talk about who she was trying to escape.
I wrote her and I said, saw you and the boys were going through it. What's the end game? You ever think about coming home? She saw the message. And so I wrote her again, you're seriously gonna ignore me? And she wrote back, hi Lil Bear, miss you guys. This is, just a bump in the road. We're gonna be fine. I got into a bad situation with she said it was a stalker psycho roommate. So me and the boys had to cut out pretty quick. And she said, no, I'm not coming back to Alturas. There's nothing there for me. And so I had wrote her back and said, I didn't know there was too much here for us to get over it in our later years. And I just said, we're not going anywhere. I brought up my brother. I said, he works at the prison. I work for the county. We're pretty well situated here. I said, if and when you change your mind, we're here. And I pray God keeps you and the boys safe. And that was the last time I talked to her, until my mom called me on May 14th and let me know she had been killed.
In Reno, Nevada, detectives investigating the murder of 42-year-old Lynette Lozano at the La Quinta Inn get a breakthrough when they discover a crucial piece of evidence in room 127.
We actually found a sight adjustment tool for a firearm, and it was set for an AK. That was located in Mr. Adams' room. He had an AK sight adjustment tool, and the caliber of rounds were typically associated with an AK firearm. So at that point, we were looking, I think, at Mr. Adams as a suspect.
I started setting up detectives who were going to look for surveillance, setting up detectives who were going to continue to talk with witnesses down at the hotel. A lot of my effort and
My core team of guys, we were working on finding Mr. Adams, and that entailed looking up his criminal history, looking up his social media, looking at his background to see family members that were in the area.
His history was extremely violent. He continually possessed weapons, firearms specifically. He had sustained 4 prior felony convictions. His first 2 felony convictions were shooting into an occupied car, and then separately, years later, shooting into an occupied house. His 3rd felony conviction was a domestic violence situation where he struck his then girlfriend's 6-year-old, and when the girlfriend came home, he attacked her, chased her with a knife. His 4th felony conviction was also domestic violence related, where a different girlfriend he attacked and strangled.
We had a license plate and we had a vehicle description, so we started to see if that license plate had been scanned anywhere in the nation, really. I had other detectives diligently looking at all the surveillance cameras in the area, and ultimately we only had the one witness that saw the vehicle leaving. But the direction that he saw the vehicle leaving, as other detectives started to search, we ended up finding quite a bit of surveillance footage that confirmed that.
Police have confirmed no information on a suspect, but we have reason to believe they are searching for a specific man. But RPD has broadcast an all-points bulletin for a Northern California man driving a white van. He's believed to be armed with a high-capacity rifle.
It was going into the next night, so I'd been awake for at least 24 hours. So I probably got back to my house around 4 a.m. And then before my head even hit the pillow, I got a call that the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department had located the vehicle.
But the man they were looking for wasn't behind the wheel.
So the driver was a man named Douglas Hargrove. So I started to ask him questions about the vehicle, and he was fairly upfront with me about it. He told me that he was a drug addict, that he was homeless, that he was in the area of Sparks, which is our neighboring city, riding a bicycle. He stopped by a 7-Eleven and was contacted by a man named Lamar. Lamar told him that he wanted to sell the van because people were after him, and that he offered to sell it to him for $1,000. Which Mr. Hargrove took him up on the offer. When I asked Mr. Hargrove, as he had previously told me that he was a drug addict and homeless, how he came to be in possession of $1,000, his story started to fall apart a little bit. I think he thought maybe it was a stolen car. That was his presumption, I believe, at the time. But when I told him that it was a homicide investigation, he sat up and really began to pay attention. So it led me to believe that he likely had no involvement in the homicide at that point. We really didn't have any charges on him at that point, so he was eventually released.
While the police were still on Lamar's trail, Lynette's family traveled from Alturas to Reno to be with her 2 youngest boys after years apart.
I had no relationship with them. We told them who we were, and they immediately came and hugged on us, and I was like, oh my gosh, did she tell them about us? Like, they weren't afraid. They just came to us.
One of the boys spoke about the night his mother was murdered.
He was recalling what happened to Nettie, and I was like, oh my gosh, he was there the entire time. Like, immediately I was like, oh my gosh, this is his memories. He's not gonna remember how much she loved him, how she put them to bed and took care of it. Like, that's not, he's gonna remember that. I wish she would have come home. She would be alive. She would be able to be thriving and care for her kids, and they wouldn't have to spend a day without her. My mom and dad were really close with the morticians up in Alturas, and they wanted to take care of everything because we were going to cremate her, because that's, after hearing what happened, that seemed like the logical choice. They're like, well, no, give us an opportunity so you guys could say goodbye, because that's very important in our culture. We kiss our dead, we hug our dead. That's our time. So when we were given that option, we took it, because I was like, that would be great if we could see her one last time. And then when it came time for the viewing, my sister was beautiful. And what he did to her, he destroyed her and took every opportunity for us to say goodbye to her away. We stood there for a few minutes. I asked my nephew, I said, you tell me when you're done. He just kept repeating, that's not my mom. That's not my mom.
For me personally, that was why this is one of those cases that sticks out in my brain most, is because of how brutal it was And then just imagining what those poor little boys had to see and go through that night and what they're going to go through the rest of their lives now.
Police worked tirelessly to track down their chief suspect.
It was a couple days later. Highway Patrol had been out on a stolen vehicle. They called for our assistance. I was part of the group of officers that went to help out.
They have the suspect in custody, and he's saying that he's Lamar Adams, the murder suspect from the other day at the La Quinta.
Nevada Highway Patrol, let me see your hands.
No, stand up. You took a good way.
Let me see your hands. Slowly open that door.
No, stand up. You took a good way.
All right, as of right now, you're being detained until I figure out what's going on, okay? Appreciate you being cooperative, all right?
Hey, man, what's your name real quick?
My name is Lamar Adams.
Lamar Adams?
Yes.
All right, you're not under arrest or anything? Okay, I'm just going to read you your Miranda rights so you know your rights, okay? You're under arrest?
Yeah.
All right, we'll get to that in a minute. Let me explain to you your rights, okay? You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to the presence of an attorney. You cannot afford an attorney. One will be appointed to you before questioning. Do you understand these rights? You still want to talk to me? Okay.
I came back here. I went to California and I came back here.
All right. Did you steal the car in California?
Yeah.
Yeah. What time did you steal the car? Yesterday. Okay. And then you drove.
I tried to get back here because I need to find out who was trying to kill me.
Someone's trying to kill you?
Yeah, they was trying to kill me in that motel.
How come you didn't call the police or anything when someone was trying to kill you?
Scared.
You scared?
It started driving me crazy. I started seeing stuff I already know who was there. Then there was somebody in the room that.
The La Quinta Inn, you know about that?
Yeah, remember that was the one in the ATL the other day?
Lamar was already in the back of the patrol car. I had walked by, his window was partially down, and I just remember seeing his face, and specifically his eyes. He had very, crazy, intense, very bugged out, bloodshot. He looked deranged to me.
So when I arrived on scene, the troopers were still trying to sort everything else because they just thought they were responding to a stolen vehicle, and now they've come into contact with a homicide suspect.
With Lamar in handcuffs and in police custody, Detective Nick Smith brings them to the Reno police station for a formal interview.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your relationship with Lynette, because I want to have a good understanding of that.
We had been through so much. We had became real close. We didn't have sex all the time. In the beginning we was, right? But as the thing was going on, I was starting to feel like it was too much weird going on there. I felt like she wasn't telling me the truth.
But you must have cared with her because you stuck with her.
I did. And I still care about it.
You still awake, Lamar? What happened to your pants there? Oh, did they tell you that?
No, just tell you. That's the clothes I had on.
That's the clothes. So you just took them because you knew we were going to want them?
Mm-hmm.
How long do you think you've been using meth?
Probably since I met her.
9 months, 10 months?
Like that long, yeah.
Not before then?
No.
How much do you think you've been using recently? Before the shooting, in the weeks before?
A little bit. Like every day.
He told me he hadn't slept for weeks, and that he had gotten to the point where he was sleeping with his Draco. So I knew that potentially a Draco would fire those 7.62 rounds that we found. But the more I talked with him, he eventually began to talk about the shooting.
There was somebody there. Maybe he was in that other corner or something like that, but there was somebody. Maybe he wasn't even behind the bed. Maybe he was in the bathroom by that time.
I found no other firearms in the room. I didn't find any other men's belongings in the room. There was no indication from the hotel manager that he had ever seen another gentleman go in there. It didn't seem plausible to me. Then what happens from there?
I ran back to the door to look out, right? Mm-hmm. And when I came back, that's when the shooting started. When I ran back.
He said he fired numerous rounds. He believed that the children were okay, and he abandoned them there. And he ran outside and got into his Chevy Astrovan and fled the area.
As police start to piece together Lamar's timeline, they learn how the homeless man in Sparks really came into possession of Lamar's van.
He offered to give Mr. Hargrove his van in exchange for Mr. Hargrove driving him to Sacramento, which made a lot more sense than, Mr. Hargrove's initial statements that he was homeless and paid $1,000 for the car.
With Lamar in custody, police now need to find the location of Lamar's Draco gun.
He said that after departing from the Astrovan, he wandered around and he found himself in a field. At that point, he said he took his duffel bag and he hid it under an apple crate in the ditch in the field.
And so while he was interviewing, the Reno Police Department was contacting the Sacramento Police Department. They sent out a team, a helicopter, and a team of detectives to search for this missing firearm. And they found the firearm really exactly as Mr. Adams had described it.
I have it forensically tested. The firearm does match the casings that are found in the room. The casings that are found there were fired by that gun.
With the gun recovered, Detective Smith has one issue with Lamar's story.
Numerous witnesses there had described 2 shooting events. They described hearing shots, a pause, and then more shots. We pressed them on that issue, and that's when the real side of Lamar came out.
They tell me that they hear shots, then a pause, then more shots. Because I ran to the door, okay? You know what I'm saying? I told you everything. I have nothing to hide. It doesn't matter if I ran in the room. I told you I killed him. Okay. So what else is there to have an attitude about? We still have to do a thorough investigation. We can investigate, but I tell you I'm the one that did it. I didn't come here with some story about, I didn't know this and that. Did I? You, 100%. You ran to the door. Your hand's right there. Why not just keep going and leave? But then I heard some more. What did you hear? I heard like somebody moving around. I didn't know if I had shot the person under the bed. I just went back to make sure that the enemy was gone. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. That's why. Okay. I think we're done.
May 2020, Reno Police Department have just gotten a full confession from Lamar Adams, the #1 suspect for the murder of single mother Lynette Lozano at the La Quinta Inn Motel. From what they've discovered, it's clear that Lynette had been in danger for some time.
She was in a pretty significant domestic violence relationship with this man that she had attempted to leave several different times and was kind of brought back in the mix. What happened? Like, what kind of pull did he have on her where she could not get herself out of it? A lot of information that we got came from her friends that she was still very much in contact with. They reached out to me to give their condolences, and I just told her, I can't believe this happened to her, and she had wrote back and said, well, she didn't want to bring him here in case anything happened to, like if he came here to hurt your family. And I thought that was a really odd statement, so I kind of like dug into her a little bit, and I said, well, what do you mean? And she said she was thinking about coming home, but she didn't want to bring him up there in case anything happened to you and your family. Which then that just added another thing, because I was like, man, I should have pushed, because if she would have came home, he wouldn't have touched her. That's where your mind goes, that you would have made the difference. That was my understanding, is she was hiding from him, and that's why she was in a motel. I can't even imagine what those moments were where she thought, maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, like maybe this will be a new life, a new start, thinking she was gonna go up to Reno and it would be a little bit better for her and the kids. I don't know the ins and outs of the relationship. I don't know what was happening with him, but I definitely know there's nothing that justified his actions.
Law enforcement wastes no time in charging Lamar Adams with murder.
So charged murder with the use of a deadly weapon. Charged count 2, child endangerment with the use of a deadly weapon, being the basis that he shot 23 times, killed Lynette, and the 2 boys were in the bed just feet away, and then he fled. So he left these 2 young kids to find their mom in that condition.
He told me that he believed he should go to prison forever, and he followed through on that. The case never went to trial. He pled guilty. He knew he was wrong. Yeah, he admitted that, and he didn't drag it out and drag the family through it, because it's traumatic. And I was really dreadful of the possibility that the kids may be called to the stand, or family may be called to the stand and have to relive that.
He screwed those kids' lives up, you know. They're always going to have that, you know. I told the boys, you know, he's in prison all his life. He'll never get out. They go, he won't find us or nothing. I said, no, he won't get out or anything. I said, he will not get out.
With his level of violence, with what he did to Lynette, what he did to these 2 young kids, it's tragic, it's sad, it's horrible. You couple that with his violent criminal history, his history of weapons, his sentence is life. He's ordered to serve the rest of his life in prison. He's eligible for parole in 33 years. Part of the discussion with the family and Detective Smith was, at his age, and when 33 years passes, is he even going to be alive to be released? And I'm confident he will spend the rest of his life in prison, where he deserves to be.
There's not one person in our family that wasn't affected by what happened. So I think at the end of the day, yes, justice was served, right? But there's no winner in this. Like, her kids grow up without experiencing her at her best. They may have seen her at her worst, but they know. My sister, when she was on it, she was a fantastic mom. Like, she loved her baby. The holidays were extreme. She loved to cook. She left 5 children who are still trying to make their way through the world. They're trying to figure it out. God willing, they'll figure it out and they'll be better for it.
I have the boys. I'm transitioning them to my sister, Diane, who has no grandkids, has 1 son, and she lives 3 blocks from me because I want to be their grandma and not their parole officer and not their mother. That way, you know, I can do more stuff with them. Like, they came over, about 8 of the grandkids came over, and they were putting Christmas stuff out and eating pizza and cupcakes and salad and hanging out. So yeah, they're doing good. They'll be fine.
When you see them there, they look just like my sister, and it's like, okay,